Okay, we're going to get started because we're going to cram a lot into the next 90 minutes. My name is Lauren Alexander Augustine, and I want to welcome you to the session, Making Ends Meet, How Communities Can Use Risk Assessment Results. All right, just to remind you, we are here to identify new ways to connect information that can be transmitted, received, and sent into people's hands so they can use it to reduce risk to people and to communities. That's why we're here. So we're looking forward to this. Now, this session will be answering 4 guiding questions. How do people behave when they receive risk information? What is the role of social networking in communicating risk information? How do the technical innovations in natural hazard risk assessment help reduce human suffering? And how can all of this help to make people and communities become more resilient? Those are the 4 guiding questions. But as you'll see from our structure, those are just the beginning. And we might have lots of other questions, and those might not be the ones everyone wants to talk about. So we're calling them guiding questions. This session is designed to be very fast-moving. We have 4 panelists esteemed, and I feel a little bit bad that they don't get the full 20-minute PowerPoint presentations that we'd all love to hear from them, but they don't in this structure. So I apologize ahead of time to you guys. In fact, we're going to have minimal PowerPoint presentations in this session because we wanted to leave a lot of time for discussion and questions and to hear from you, because like I said in my Ignite presentation, what we want to do is create a new agenda for meeting this need. And you'll see here we have 3 flip charts. And as the session goes on, these flip charts will be used to fill in a new agenda full of recommendations or action items or to-do lists or whatever you want to call it. And towards the end of the 90-minute session, everyone will have an opportunity, if you have an idea, if you have a recommendation, to write it down and stick it up onto these panels. I'll just give you an overview that we have designed this panel to talk in terms of pre-disaster mode or normal time, during an event, and post-event discussions. And we have organized our recommendation lists along those lines too. Okay? The structure of this will be each of our esteemed panelists will have a 2-minute opening statement. Then we'll have a disaster panel about the pre-disaster for 20 minutes. Another one during the event for another 20 minutes. The final 20-minute panel will be on post-event panel discussion. Then our panelists get another 2 minutes each, have a closing statement, and then collectively we'll take the last 10, 12 minutes to fill out these recommendation lists. That's what we're going to accomplish today. So I just want to introduce our speakers. Again, we have Tim Tinker here from the U.S. We have Ana Lucia Hill from Mexico City. We have Franz Varela from Haiti. And we have Dave Ropeek from Boston, U.S. I will kind of...
I don't know which part are you?
From the U.S. Yes? So without delay, we'll go in this order, so you guys will get accustomed to Tim, Anna, Franz, and Dave, and I will turn this over to Tim.
Thank you, Lauren. Good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing?
Hello.
I'm going to stand up because there's some folks sitting in the back. If you were here for the very first session when Lauren really cast the picture here, we're going to be building a story over the next hour and a half, and this story is going to begin with the concept of the enterprise. The enterprise concept is about us. It's about us working together in terms of the emergency response concept. And there are 3 parts to this enterprise. It consists of 1, the people, the human network. 2 is the platform, is the technology. And 3 is the ultimate result. What's the ultimate outcome that we're looking for? That's going to be the decisions, the actions, the behaviors that we're wanting people to take. We're also going to be talking about it in the context of the various phases, our enterprise. In the pre-phase, we're wanting to share a common vision, a common purpose, a common strategy in terms of our preparation In the response, that we are acting individually and collectively toward a common goal around expected as well as unexpected events. And then in terms of resilience from that experience, taking those lessons learned and constantly innovating and re-energizing our effort. My part of the story, my part of the narrative, it's going to require some audience participation from you very early in the morning here. So what I'd like for you to do is to take 30 seconds, actually 15 seconds. We're going to use the buddy system here. So introduce yourself to the person that you're sitting next to. That's going to be your team. If you're sitting alone, you can introduce yourself to yourself if you haven't acquainted yourself. So take 15 seconds and introduce yourself. Okay, come back to the front. A big part of this enterprise is skills. It's not just about words, it's not just about messages, it's about practical skills that we can use in time of emergency. We're going to be looking at 3 skill sets: performance, platform, and partnership. Practical application here. Practical example. Let's say there's an active shooter in this building. What are the 4 things that we need to do? Take another 15 seconds. Come up with at least one idea. One idea with your partner. One idea with your partner. Four skill sets that we want to perform. Number 1, okay, everybody's attention. Number 1, we need to get out. We need to get to a safe place. Number 2, we need to call out once we get out. Number 3, we need to hide out if we have to barricade. And number 4, we would actually have to take out if there was no other resort. That's a last resort. So we're going to be talking about practical skills in the context of this narrative. A couple of scenarios. We're going to be using, again, using our buddy system, 1-minute video, 1-minute exercise, and a 1-minute debrief. So we're going to be running a simulation here. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague.
Thank you very much. Hi, good morning. If I have a strong accent, it's because English obviously is not my first language. I'm from Mexico. I'm Ana Lucia Gil, and I'm Director General of Civil Protection for the federal government. It's equal to FEMA here. And I'm sorry about the sound. I just wanted to share with you. We're talking about risk management and how we share the information. This sound, we put it in every message in Mexico every time we want to send a warning. So local people, they know it's an important message. And when we finish the message, it sounds again so they can move and do whatever they have to do according to the message. In Mexico, as many other countries around the world, risk management is a shared responsibility, a responsibility that is shared between governments in all levels, municipal, state, and federal governments, NGOs, and private institutions. Some of you may be familiar. Are you familiar with how the system works in Mexico City? In the country? No? Hopefully during this dialogue, we'll be able to share the way we do things in Mexico. Very interesting because even though we don't have a lot of technology or a lot of resources, we're able to respond well to emergencies. But we have a slogan that we all share, and it's we all make civil protection. That's a fact. Every single person has a responsibility in Mexico. This responsibility requires a diversity of resources to ease the way actors react to risk information. Exercising information sharing with the use of technological tools is key in allowing us to reach an optimal level of preparedness, a timely response to emergency disasters, and a more responsible recovery process. It has been said here that we will try to answer 4 important questions on risk communications and the way we use technology in an effort to build an agenda that will guide us to become a more and have more resilient communities. I'm sure that during this dialogue, we will be able to share our past experiences, good experiences and bad experiences, in order to find the balance in the use of communications technology and personal communications to achieve this goal. Thank you.
This year, we have two major earthquakes in Latin America. The first one in Haiti, magnitude 7.0, caused about 230,000 deaths, while the second one, magnitude 8.8, in Chile, caused about 500 dead. The difference in the catastrophic impact of this natural disaster is not unprecedented. As we enter the hurricane season, we can illustrate this fact with this slide regarding the hurricane. Hurricane Eva was a Category 5 storm, recorded as the 10th largest in the America. But these numbers give an idea of the average death toll of hurricane in the Caribbean. Here are two examples of storm affecting Haiti. Jeanne 2004, Category 3, and Anna 2008, Category 1. Despite the fact that the storms didn't landfall in the country, these numbers illustrate the vulnerabilities of cities and communities in Haiti, and they are symptomatic of the chronic systematic failures of risk assessment and risk mitigation in Haiti. At the national panel, Dr. Norris from Dartmouth College highlight 4 ingredients for community resilience: social capital, community competence, economic development, and robust communication infrastructure. Haiti was deficient on all 4 points. To be effective in risk assessment, we need to address those 4 issues. One of the essential actions put forth also by Vane and Campanella in the Resilient City marvelous book is that resilience benefits from the inertia of prior investment. In Haiti, socioeconomic opportunities were few and far behind the little that existed was concentrated in Port-au-Prince. Well levels were so low that the population appeared to be risk-seeking. The state could not protect the population and from obvious cities. To have an idea, those are some view of some cities in Port-au-Prince. God City in Port-au-Prince, Gonaïve, X1, the chaos in Cape Haitian, chaos also in Gonaïve. Okay. This gives you an idea. Those are various images of what is happening in Haiti. Here are floods in Gonaïve, the main street in Gonaïve, and you can see the water 2 meters high, and this storm dive in La Tannerie. Okay, let's go. But at the center, what we have is a very weak state. And this is, what we have to do is build back better, and reconstruction should be a way to transform a disaster into an opportunity. It must be ambitious, given the challenges posed by natural disaster. This reconstruction must also divorce with the logic of destroyed territories, and it should be carried out swiftly and efficiently. But some issues has to be raised during this session. First one, all innovation can bring about a consensual change that is sufficiently strong and symbolic, or to create a climate of political stability and consensus between political and economical elites, and all innovation and technology can help in building a strong decentralized state structure, guaranteeing public interest and able to support the strategy.
You want to catch your breath now? Slides will be available. I have one simple message. I am not a disaster expert. I have studied up on what smarter people than me have figured out about the psychology that causes people to perceive risk, either a low-level or a high-level disaster sort of risk, through emotional lenses. It makes a great deal of difference to how you get people to prepare for disasters respond to them, and recover from them, if you incorporate into your planning and your activities, not just your messages, your policies, an understanding of and a respect for the emotional ways that people are interacting with a crisis. Very quick example. People who have more of a sense of control suffer less post-traumatic stress disorder, even though they have been terribly traumatized. If you can give them that sense of control during the event, your recovery will go better. So the simple message is this. Disaster risk management incorporates a great deal of management of the human behavioral sides of how people prepare, respond, and recover from. And you can manage that better if you look to the literatures of the psychology of how people perceive risks so that you can understand and respect that and build that into your policies and actions. What do I do with the extra minute? So I heard this one the other guy walks into a bar.
I just want to say those were amazing opening statements, and so we have a very rich menu, as you can see, for the next, 80 minutes or so. So Tim's going to walk us through a few interactive exercises, which is cool. Anna's going to help us remind us how technology actually works in a megacity, in Mexico City, and then across the country, too. Franz Varela is going to help us understand how we can use all of this to help rebuild a stronger and more resilient Haiti. And Dave is going to understand how the brain and our physiological construction, psychological construction, will help execute this and make it go a little better. So I want to thank you guys. That was very clear. Excellent time. I have a couple of housekeeping things that I forgot to mention. I want to welcome our virtual audience, those who are on Twitter, Facebook. Hello, I don't know if you can see us, but we welcome you. And we also welcome your questions. And there's someone here to receive those tweets and messages to come in. We will be receiving those, so welcome. The other thing is we are going to try to be interactive as Tim started off. We see you're a social audience. We're very happy for that. When you address the panel, because we have an external audience, we ask you to use your microphones. And there's microphones set up around the room. And in the sake of time, to get to Anna's question here, can I have a show of hands of who's from the United States here? Fabulous. Can I have a show of hands of who's from South America, Africa, Europe, Asia, Australia, Antarctica? All right. Wow, we have a global audience. Caribbean. Sorry. I hear the voice back there. Okay. Central America and the Caribbean. Okay. And New Zealand. Okay, did I forget any of the things? I'm sorry. I'm an ignorant American. Geography. Okay. And anyone here a practitioner in disaster management or risk management? Academician? Government employee? Interested citizen? Technologician? All right. Nonprofit? Private sector? All this.
Can I ask one real quick?
Yeah.
Anybody ever survive a really serious disaster, live through it and survive it? Thank you.
Okay. Wonderful. Anna, does that help? That was an excellent exercise. No, thank you. Okay. So now we're going to move into the first panel. And this is the pre-disaster. You can think of it in normal time. This is when things are still not quite chaotic. And everyone's going to take 1 minute here either to say their main message about pre-disaster or normal time. Tim's going to walk us through an exercise. So we're going to start with Tim.
Pre-disaster, what was the important skill there, the performance skill? What do we mean by a performance skill? What are the attitudes? What are the decisions? What are the actions that we need to take? We either going to start doing something, stop doing something, do something differently, or do more of something during a crisis. Going to show you a short video segment. It's going to run about 30 seconds. After the 30 seconds, we're going to go back into our teams, our buddy team. I want you to come up with at least 3 ideas. This is going to be an earthquake scenario. What are going to be the 3 things you're going to do with your buddy to survive this disaster?
Earthquakes can devastate cities, trapping innocent victims under tons of rubble. If you ever find yourself in this worst-case scenario, here are some key points to remember.
30 seconds. There's at least 10 things. Come up with at least 3 with your buddy. These are the things that are going to help you to survive. Okay, what did we come up with? What did we come up with? What are some of the things? Quickly. Sorry? Duck, cover, and roll. That's good for fire as well. What else? Get under the table. Okay, one more. Let's go. Here we go. Don't run. Well, back. No. Don't run. Find shelter under heavy object. Protect airways, electrical fires, toxic fumes. Be aware of aftershocks. Avoid water. Watch out for ruptured pipes. Call 911. And here are some of the other competencies, some of the other skills that we would want people to have. Is that too much to remember? Obviously. David's an expert at telling us how much information we can absorb and process at one time. So for folks, we'd want to try to narrow this list to maybe 3. What are the 3 things that you can remember that you can do? Active shooter. What were the top 4 things? Get out. We're going to do this with every simulation. Get out, call out, hide out, take out. I'm going to ask you this again around the next segment. No, we're talking about an active shooter. This is earlier on before we started. So we're going to come back. I'm going to be coming back between these 2 scenarios. What principle M are we using here? Repetition, repetition, repetition. Okay, that's the important thing in this. I'm going to hand it off to Mike.
Thank you. Thank you very much. In the ideal world, during the pre-disaster event, we can share information about the risks we face in our community. We can work with the communities to identify the responsibilities, the role each actor has to play during an emergency. We can also share some warnings. But the purpose of working during a pre-disaster phase is to change attitudes towards risk. Is to include people in the process, to make people accountable, to make people responsible, to have risk-adverse people, to have better prepared communities, and to have resilient communities. From the government point of view, is this enough? It's a question. Is this enough to change behaviors? I leave you with the question that we want to work during the dialogue. And is enough to work on risk maps? Is enough to have warnings already set? Is enough to send bulletins out? Is enough to use the social networks to share information risks? How to get everybody involved? How to get everybody committed? Those are my questions to you.
Okay. Lauren began with stories. And what I'm going to do, I will try to come with an old story, but a very old one. The Abrahamic religions offer a very good story about risk appreciation. And after receiving a revelation from God about the coming flood, Noah dressed himself as a widower and went down to a marketplace. Seeing Noah with ash all over his body, the villagers gathered and asked him who he was mourning. And the answer of Noah was very simple. Noah told them, I'm grieving because you are all already dead. There is a flood coming, and it will kill all of you. This is a very whole story. But much like Noah, we must construct warning system that can adequately animate the communities given the magnitude of the impending disaster. It is imperative in countries like Haiti, even if we don't have good technologies, to have social networks and crowdsourcing technologies that help us building systems that inform and ignite proper action and behavior. But we have to do a little bit more than Noah, because in countries like Haiti, before the technological obstacles of getting the information to the people, we face two other major impediments. Distrust brought upon by sweeping socioeconomic inequalities, and poverty, which makes large portion of the population risk-seeking or risk-neutral.
Wonderful message about animating people to care more, to get them prepared. So here's a specific suggestion for disaster preparedness. These programs largely fail. Most people don't do the preparation stuff. I may be in California for earthquake, kind of, but most people don't. Let me do a little exercise with you. Promise it will take less than 2 minutes. 1 minute. Imagine you're driving down a highway right now. Picture this in your mind. You're going 70 miles an hour. Your foot is mashed down on the speed, on the gas pedal, right? No traffic, clear road. Now, close your eyes and keep driving. Keep going. But why no? You're in this room. I'm making you do it. You don't like it, do you? Why? Why is it dangerous? You don't have the control. Thank you. I've seized on your word. The psychology of risk perception, I'll be talking about it all morning, is that if you feel like you have control, you'll be less afraid. You want people to get prepared? Craft a message that says it's going to feel like driving down the highway with your eyes closed when the building starts to shake if you haven't figured out what to do in advance. Or something like that. The issue of control is an affective or emotional lever to make real or animate the feeling of what it's going to be like if you're not prepared. So you can be prepared by having your flashlight and whatever preparation is. Speaking in the language of control, and it's honest, but making people legitimately feel what it would feel like then more will animate them more.
So for the next 10 minutes, 7 minutes, this is the time for you guys to ask questions of our panelists in the pre-disaster mode. We heard a lot of different things here, and so you can capitalize on anything you heard or something that you would like to hear. But we invite your questions for the next 7 minutes, and then we'll move to the during disaster phase.
And would you just tell us who you are as you ask the question?
And please come up and use the microphones on the side. We will keep these handhelds up here. So, sir, please. And anyone else? And you can come here. Yep, just come up to the microphones and we will get your questions.
Yes, I'm Marcial Blondes from Peru. A couple of weeks ago, I was invited by my high school to go and take a look at the building. And so they showed me the rooms where the kindergarteners are. And I asked them, how are you prepared for the earthquake? Because this is an old school building, and it's going to suffer damage in the earthquake. And they told me, civil defense has instructed us to tell the children to stay where they are until the shaking stops. And I told them, this is very stupid, because the door is right here, right there, the garden is right there. So what you should do is to instruct the teachers to take the children out. No, because people die or get hurt because things fall on their heads. And In many places, civil defense felt as a blanket statement that people should go under tables or things like that. I think that's very absurd and very stupid, because there are many occasions in which the easiest thing to do is just to walk out and be safe. Thank you.
We'll ask everyone to pose their comments as a question so we can so we can include as many people as possible.
Yeah, this is more of a question to the suggestion which was given.
Who are you? Where are you from?
Yeah, I'm Ravi Sinha from India. This is regarding, again, being receptive to the knowledge or to the cognition of disasters, that if you make the people afraid, then they will remember this message more. But the only caution is that in any field where you work or you talk to, there are going to be issues where people would like to make you afraid. So starting from H1N1 to terrorism to disasters to on traffic to crossing the street and so on. So one also needs to be cautious about not making the people afraid to live, because everything you do has an element of danger in it. So the message of disasters or message of making the people afraid needs to be very carefully calibrated so that it does not have the unintended consequences.
I absolutely agree. Beware, however, of what's called the fear of fear. A lot of people who do communication about various risks are afraid to make people afraid at all, for fear that, oh my God, they'll be too afraid. I'm being too simplistic to your response. I'm not suggesting in my little, quite off the top of my head example that you make people afraid. What I'm suggesting broadly is that you make people feel what it might feel like then. That you speak about your issues in an emotional way, in a reality way, that is likely to resonate with them. If you just give them the facts about have a flashlight and water and a plan to meet your family, that doesn't animate. But if you talk about how it's going to feel like driving down the road, I mean, you had an emotional reaction to that. That was easy to do, because I know that. I wasn't making her afraid to live. You do have to calibrate it. But I encourage you to think about speaking about things in real... Survival is pretty important. We want to do it. Being a little afraid is okay. Being too afraid is not. Speaking in an emotional language is much more likely to animate the activities that you want them to do.
Disaster preparedness is probably a religious effort. I will be back on that. There is in French, I don't know if it is the same in English, between knowing and believing. People have to believe that the catastrophe is ineluctable, is imminent. They have to believe. For example, when you know that it will rain, probably you will not take your umbrella. But if you believe or you are certain that it will rain, you will take your umbrella. This is, we should have a memory not of the past even, but of the future in such a way that we are well prepared. We have to behave like the disaster is happening right now and be prepared to take actions right now.
What I think is about education. You have to educate people about what can happen and give them the tools so they can take, it's their decision. At the end of the day, it's their decision. We cannot force them to do anything. It's their decision, but they need the information to make a wise decision instead of an ignorant decision about what can happen to them and what can they lose given an incident, whatever it is. It's about educating people about the scenario.
So fear is an inert energy. It all comes down to how we harness that energy. Instead of fear, we should be thinking of vigilance. Vigilance is very different. It implies fear is an unskilled state of mind as well, whereas vigilance is very much of a skilled state of mind. What are some of the skills around vigilance? It's how I decide whether the threat is real or it's perceived. It's how I decide how I may use the information that I already have. It's how I decide to explore the possible consequences of either doing A, B, or C. in that situation. So that's very different from fear, isn't it? It's actually having a mental strategy as well as a physical strategy that I have not only repeated, but I have rehearsed this in my head so that if scenario A does occur, it becomes a reflexive automatic response in that type of threat scenario.
Take one more, the last question here for the pre-disaster or the pre-event, and then we will move to the actual event.
Okay, good morning. I'm Oscar Cifuentes from Chile. I was in Concepcion at the 8.8 earthquake. And it's not a question, just is share with you my concerns. After the quake, well, before the quake, everything was moved to the digital media and communications. But with the quake, we have no communication. Then it was immediately no communication. No one can communicate with anybody. It was at least 4 days without cell phone communication. Some companies maybe 3 days, or later. And I agree with some of you that education is the key point, and repetition also, because most of the people save his life because they know how to do, what to do. And for example, the tsunami, the big wave that came to the Concepcion area, it arrived 3 hours later of the quake. But the quake was just 160 kilometers away. It doesn't make sense. But people know that they have to be away several hours. And the technician said that if in the 1 hour no wave comes, then you just go back to your house. Some of the people went to their house and they dead.
Thank you so much. Oh, absolutely.
I agree totally with you just what said. It's amazing how nowadays we rely on technology and everything. Well, this panel is about technology and how can support what we do on a daily basis. But it cannot replace what we do. Yesterday I was giving a very simple daily example. It's the email. People think that because they send you an email, they communicated with you. And sometimes I don't go to meetings, and they tell me, like, why didn't you come to the meeting? I send you an email. Email is not communication. I have the BlackBerry, and I can look at the emails, but I'm also talking to people all day. I'm in meetings talking to real people. I'm not checking the email all the time to see if they invited me to another meeting. No, it's amazing. You cannot replace the actual communication between persons. That is what works really. We have another example that when people really think that technology is the answer, it's kind of scary. We have, at a local level, people responsible of civil protection that they don't do anything because they don't have money to buy technology to work on their atlas. It's scary. They have to work. They can do, what I always say is that you can do 90% of your work in civil protection without technology. But you don't do it because you don't have it. We cannot fall in that problem.
Well, we knew coming into this that 90 minutes was going to be short. And it is going to be short because we're going to run out of time. And so just know that, and that's okay. As we end this first session on the pre-event, I want you all to think about if anything that we heard here, we heard about education and vigilance and a very compelling illustrative story about warning. If anything comes to mind as an action item or something that you think can be implemented, I want you to think about that, because at the end of the session, at 20 minutes after 10 10, we are going to start to ask you to put your ideas up. And John Brown in the back has pink pieces of paper. If you have an idea and you want to write it down for our panels here, we invite you to do that. So this will be our action item, our recommendation list. Okay, with that said, we're going to move to what happens or what happens during an event, and we start with Tim.
We're in the disaster. We're going to return to our earthquake scenario. Our colleague did make a good point about technology. Sometimes it doesn't work. In many cases, it does work. In a lot of cases, we have actual case studies where it saves lives. I'm going to show you another very short video segment. Again, about 30 seconds. Our second skill set in simulation number 2 is our platform skills. And what we mean by our platform skills is the technology. And for this particular example, we're going to use the mobile device. I'm going to ask you in your teams, what are all of the emergency functions and features on our BlackBerry, on our iPhone, that we could use in this situation with the assumption that it's operable?
After an earthquake, you're going to be dazed and confused. But once the building stops shaking and the debris settles, that's your time to come up with a plan.
I'll tell a thing and stop. Don't reach a clear area. It's difficult to move without dislocation stuff. So heavy as hell. Try and keep calm and think logically. There are a few simple, critical things you can do that can save your life. You even been under this desk here.
The few simple things that we're going to be focusing on are the platform skills. Take 30 seconds with your team. What are the features and the functions? What do we come up with? What do we come up with? Give us our top three features and functions. Well, what would they be?
Okay.
Call out.
Top 3.
Top 3. Text. Sorry? Call. Light. Here's a short list. SMS. We already have some of these. MMS. Still video. Internet browsing. GPS. ICE in case of emergency. Emergency contact dialing. And in addition to all of that, a number of other apps that we can have on the phone. Is it reasonable to expect that people would have a basic knowledge, basic skills about the use of those features on their phones? Is it reasonable? Okay. Why is that? Let's get our colleague here on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being extremely competent and confident that you could use these skills in that type of scenario. What's your score on a scale of 1 to 10? All of them? Whatever you're comfortable with. 6. So the question there, our colleague is at 6. The question for us is, what is it going to take to get our colleague to 9 or 10? And getting our colleague to 9 or 10 has to do with what? It has to do with capability. It has to do with efficacy. It has to do with resources. It has to do with all of those things. Thanks.
Thank you. During the disaster, the use of new technology has proven to be useful to promote people's participation, whether it is to share real-time information or of what is happening, to organize groups of volunteers, to identify or locate missing people, or to promote humanitarian aid. This, and I'm talking about social networks, social networking tools, have been also used intentionally or not to create panic and to confuse people. This network also serves as a huge complaint boxes to criticize the authorities that are working in the emergency. in major disaster or just in the peak on an emergency, you may also find that communications are down, that collapse all the system, or that you just cannot go through because everyone is using the phones at the same time. A fertile scenario for speculation and a scenario for rumors that spread rapidly, an enemy of the response process. My questions to you are, how this help to the sum of efforts among different actors when responding to a disaster? How to eliminate the sense of urgency in gathering information and form more responsible citizens? How scenarios like this help build the confidence and trust so needed in the risk disaster management field? It's interesting because when the earthquake in Chile happened, we have a tsunami warning in Mexico, but it was very early in the day. But it was on Saturday when everyone wakes up late. So I was having breakfast when suddenly, and I think that the tsunami the warning was only just for the Baja California, south and north. But people saw tsunami warning, and they started tweeting, like journalists and reporters tweeting, we have a tsunami warning. And I was like, all morning I spent on my cell phone saying, like, there's no longer valid that warning. So be careful. How can we make people tweeting responsible of what they do? Because really, believe me, they were saying that on Twitter, and then I had a lot of people that were spending their weekend in Acapulco calling me to see if they were safe. Acapulco is a beautiful, beautiful beach in the Pacific, in the Mexican Pacific. So it could be, the tool could be very useful, but it could be also bring a lot of, I've used the tool in my favor. When we have an earthquake, I'm going to tell you the exact date that I never remember. It was April 4th. It was a 7.2 earthquake in Mexicali. We didn't have a lot of damage because they know they live in a seismic zone, so it's very plain. You don't have high buildings. Most of the damage was in the rural sector, in the hydrological infrastructure, and some roads and some bridges. But even though I sent my people and they were there 5 hours after you know where Mexicali is? It's in the border of, in the north border with Calexico, California. I received pictures of the damage, and that was we were using as the official information because that was the only thing we had available. But we also received information of people that were saying, I'm just looking people robbing, what happens all the time, robbing a shopping mall. And I was asking them, where? Tell me where so I can send the police there. No response. No? Everything is a disaster. Tell me exactly where you took that picture so I can send people to close the street. No response. So if you're tweeting information and you have someone asking you to solve problems, respond. It's not enough. That's what I think. It's not enough. Where's the credibility then? I'm sorry.
Sorry. Thank you. Okay. Unfortunately, I will continue with another story. But this one is about failures of hierarchical command and control system during disaster. It is important because the most obvious and yet striking fact during a disaster is that mostly nothing works. Roads are blocked, communication systems are down, power is out. And on January 12, after talking to the Prime Minister, who couldn't get in touch with the President, I opened a motorcycle and went to the President's house. I met him at his house, and he told me that he was trying to be in contact with the minister's headquarters. The ministers is the UN Central Command, Military Central Command in Haiti. And he told the Minister for Homeland Security and me to go to the Hotel Christopher, where the Minister Central Command was. And we arrived to find that the building had collapsed, killing all the ministers' Central Command. A similar story exists for the 2004 flooding in Gonaives, in which both the mayor and the state delegate building were 2 meters down under the water. But what we can learn from this, I would take away 3 points from those stories. First, system for during disaster must be organized on densely connected networks instead of hierarchical trees, because when one link fails, all the system in the structure fails. The second point is the need for fallout type location outside the threatened areas with redundant power, redundant energy sources, and redundant modes of communication. This leads me to the third most important point, redundancy. For the first few days after the earthquake, as she reminded me, everything was broken, especially cell phones working on sporadic services. At that time in Haiti, we broadcast information via only 2 radio stations in Port-au-Prince. Other communication venue was Web 2.0 technologies, Skype, Facebook, Twitter, used to communicate with people aboard and within the disaster areas. In fact, for example, several interviews conducted by NPR or by the New York Times were conducted via Skype. Social groups like traditional organization in Haiti, Combat Squad, women organization, religious leader, youth groups, women working in markets, must be included in disaster communication and action protocols. Shortly, communication infrastructures must be layered and dense, and information transmitted on those infrastructures trustable.
You said you'd rate yourself a 6 on your ability to use that device. Was that because you're unfamiliar with it, or you'd be stressed out? Which was the limiting factor between 6 and 10? Right. We don't use pet first aid function on our, the app, right? There's some of the apps that we're not familiar with. And we don't use the ones we don't mostly need, which is like the earthquake, oh my God button, because we don't mostly need that, right? So here's the problem. When you're under stress, you're in a fight or flight response or freeze response, as I said yesterday, and that's pouring chemicals into your brain and changing your chemistry that makes you stupid. That will diminish your competence to be able to figure out technology you're not familiar with. It will diminish your mental competence to figure out how to use apps you're not familiar with. So in preparing people for a disaster and training them like what all those apps are and things to do, you need to be you need to make the point that you need to be familiar with this in advance, practice it or something like that, because you'll lose your capacity to figure stuff out in a disaster. Second thing, how would it feel if you were told this is a tool, so turn on your location services and send a message so people know where you are, and it doesn't work? Emotionally, how did it feel when you watched that video? You said, that's scary.
Yeah,
Scary makes you stupid. It helps you survive in some ways, but it diminishes your ability to think carefully and do the right things. So if the thing fails, the tool you've just been given fails, your scary goes up. and your ability to respond thoughtfully goes down. So in preparation, telling people to use this tool, couch it as there are other things you can do, but here's what to do if you can use this tool.
I'm going to make an executive decision here in the interest of time, because I do want to make sure we get through the last segment, which is after the event. So I'm going to ask that the participants sitting in the seats, if you have questions for the panelists, to write them down on your white paper or any paper you have and hand them up to us, because we're going to go right back to Tim to start the third phase of the post-event, and then that will give us a few minutes at the end to do a joint question, and then we can move into starting to post our recommendations on the list.
Our third skill set is the partnership skill. And what we're talking about here is actually the information partners, either formal or informal, either conscious or unconscious. I'm going to shift the scenario too, shifting it from the earthquake to the most recent New York City bomb threat. So let's watch this.
A bomb scare in Times Square. It's the corner of 45th and 8th Avenue. Hundreds, if not thousands of people are here because it's theater time. It's just 8 o'clock. There's 5 theaters on this block alone of the 38 Broadway theaters. And hundreds
So
of...
this gives us a flavor. Actually, within minutes, over 40 YouTube videos had already been uploaded from that scene. The question for us is these folks, whether conscious or unconscious, they are an untapped resource for us. There is an emerging class of individuals. There's an emerging area even called citizen journalism. Citizen journalists or eye reporters. If CNN, anybody seen the eye reporters there? The question for us, he was essentially reporting on what? The 5 W's in the H. The who, what, why, what I'm seeing, what I'm observing. How could we take it to the next strategic level in terms of helping him develop his skills to where he can be part of that information apparatus, that information structure? How could we do that? Take 30 seconds with your partner. What type of skills would we want this individual to have? Let's get a couple of ideas. What are a couple of things that come to mind? A couple of things that come to mind. Everybody's attention? A couple of ideas? Tell people to leave Times Square. What else? Other ideas? What did we come up with? How can we equip this individual to actually be a part of our overall response apparatus? Do what? Structure an app. Short list here. Some basic threat analysis. What I'm saying. What that possibly means. How I'm communicating. Am I talking to the policeman? Am I talking to the EM person? Sample situations or scenarios. How they can relate to the authorities on the ground in terms of becoming a part of that conduit of information. Evacuation procedures. And here are the citizen reporter types of skill sets. Scene analysis, interviewing, information gathering, photo, digital, social media, writing, and editing. All in real time. All in real time. Are we there yet? No, we are not. But there are a lot of great journalism schools that are starting to move their students into this type of digital environment. So with that, I'll hand it off to my colleague.
I don't know which phase of the emergency is the most critical. But in terms of building capacity and trust for future events, the post-disaster phase is very, very critical. I refer to the blaming game, the accountability process, and the correct use of resources in the recovery, in the reconstruction. We just recently this year started using in Mexico tools to now I won't know how to pronounce it. how to georeference images as part of the damage assessment process in order to measure more realistically the personal and material damage suffered after a disaster. And although this information is not open to the public yet, it will be eventually, we think it would help government officials, municipal, state, and federal to build trust about how the resources are being used, how money is being spent. Will also provide transparency to the reconstruction process, will help close the gap between what government do and what people's expectations are. And I will leave it there.
Okay. In regards to post-disaster, I would like to make 2 remarks. The first one is the difference is a difference between during disaster where we need a network system and the after disaster where we need a strong command and control system. We observe that in Haiti. The problem we are facing is the lack of coordination between a lot of entities in charge of managing the disaster. You have a principal agent problem where you have many principals and nothing is doing. Going also to the to some economics, when you look at the hour-plat measures of risk aversion, you see that is closely dependent on wealth. But in Haiti, people are very, very poor. That means they have negligible aversion to risk. Let's say they are really very neutral to risk. And for this reason, they have nothing to lose, and because they have lost everything, including access to choices. This is why in this concrete situation, they are taking so many risks. But if we want to intervene, we have to behave as if the calamity is already upon us. We do not have to think about post-disaster. What we have to do about post-disaster, we have to do it before, but really before.
When you help people recover from disasters, you're doing what? For the physical health, you're doing surgery, you're doing medicine, you're getting them clean water, you're dealing with these kind of concrete physical health challenges, right? To what degree does disaster recovery include helping people deal with the health consequences of stress? Not much? I wouldn't think so. Okay. So here's what happens when you're stressed. More stress than normal. So like if your boss is a jerk but you're used to it, that's stress, but you're normalized to it, okay? But a disaster obviously is way more than normal. The systems that get turned up help you survive in the short run, but they're not supposed to stay turned up, and the systems that get turned down aren't supposed to stay turned down. So very quickly, when you're at chronic stress, one of the systems that gets turned down is your immune system. That means that in pure medical terms, disaster recovery has to help people reduce their stress, or they're going to get more sick, period. So leadership needs to show great empathy, feelings. At that time, we want the president to be angry about the oil spill, not thoughtful about the oil spill, because that's going to show emotional connection to what people are going through. We want to empower people as much as they can, again, because control helps give them that sense that my eyes are open when I'm driving the car, and that reduces stress. Post-disaster recovery has to think, I think more than I know that it does, on the health damage of stress. Does a lot of other things. I just mentioned the immune system raises your blood pressure, screws you with your memory, your fertility, growth, healthy fetal development, a whole bunch of things. So the emotional recovery is a health aspect, and there are ways to work on that. That's what I would add to the post-recovery report.
Thank you. This is so interesting to listen to. And when you guys are talking, I don't know if you hear what we hear, but it's very interesting. I want to say thank you for your comments.
She would have been running from Times Square, she said so fast.
I know. I was like, why are they still standing there? I was with you, Mary Lou.
And I'll tell you what, they're still standing there for the same reasons they don't prepare in advance to disasters. They're not threatened. They don't think it's real. They're not scared. They're not. You haven't evoked the vigilant.
They don't own their command. That's right. So what I'm going to do now, just because this 90 minutes is the fastest 90 minutes I've had in a long time, I have a few questions here. Maybe is there any more white paper questions? I'll take those and I'll read them all and ask the panelists to respond to these questions here. Then we will move to your final closing statements. And we'll open it up to see if the audience has closing statements. Elizabeth? Oh, okay. Yeah, why don't you take that to the microphone? We'll start with the online question.
A wandering bird has tweeted asking how to make people aware of the severity of risks while empowering creating control rather than fear. What are concrete strategies?
I'm glad we have some smart panelists.
Thank you. I will go with education again. We need to make people learn the risks they're facing and the options they have, so they can make a wise decision. But we need to do it in a way that they really make it their risk. It's like the video in Times Square. If they don't see the risk as theirs, they will stay there, and it's going to be an adventure, taking pictures and interviewing people. But if they know a risk can generate a damage to them, directly or indirectly, the reaction will be more different.
Hello, wandering bird. You're out there, whatever, however you're getting this. Can you hear me now?
Right.
Right. You asked the question that the gentleman from India also asked. How do you communicate that it's serious enough to worry about but not freak people out too much? And there are degrees of severity. So you need to communicate as you're educating people about, what could an earthquake do to you? You might be trapped. You might be whatever. So that's in the educational material. You can describe that. And you can describe it in a way that wisely, as Tim suggested, encourages vigilance and readiness for it. So if you're trapped, don't you want to have, in your building, don't you want to have some water around? Wouldn't that give you a feeling of control? And then you embed, so that it's vigilance instead of fear, an appropriate level of emotional reality, language, to the education. You can't just give them the facts, because they won't own it. They won't leave Times Square. But you add an emotional context. Imagine how it's going to feel for you guys, kind of language, which could encourage more people, not all of them, to own it and take the actions you want.
I'm going to read through, and these responses already have addressed at least some of these questions. But thank you, Wandering Bird, and for those birds who are landed here in this room, I want to acknowledge your contributions too.
We're all now following you.
That's right. I want to congratulate this group for listening very carefully, because if you guys were my students, you guys would get A's for listening and understanding. Right. So the first question says this, or a statement says this: it is usually the most vulnerable people, socially, economically, etc., who are mostly affected by disasters. How can we, as disaster management practitioners, provide these people with the proper technology given the limited resources? So this goes to something that Franz was discussing. David, I think you had just answered this question. If you
want to do them one at a time?
No, I'm going to read them all.
Okay.
Because we're going to stop very firmly at 10:25 to move into the closing segment. Okay. But I think you already answered this question, but I do want to read it because someone took the time to write it down. If your technology tools are not working, other than yelling help, what else can you do? What can you do to prepare yourself with such low cognitive functioning? That was one question. Another one, I think this is for Tim. At what point, this goes to your citizen reporter, Tim, scenario. At what point does the citizen reporter become a burden rather than an assistant? And Anna, I think, talked a little bit about this. Franz mentioned something about redundancy and building redundancy into a system. And there's two questions related to redundancy. How do you see the risk assessments presented in these last 2 days helping communities or local government before and after the disaster? So this is about kind of aggregating what we've learned over these last couple of days here for action for the local and community levels. And then the second question along the lines of redundancy is about research information and whether it is shared widely enough to be useful during a disaster. And the last question I have submitted here how do you assure that heads of the administrative system and public services are well prepared to face a crisis? What if some or none of them show up during a crisis? So these are the questions that you guys presented. These are hard, and I'm glad I get a microphone to pass off to someone else who can answer them. And we'll take the next few minutes to kind of talk about these in general, and then we'll go to the
I'm going to answer the cognitive function one first, real simply. Part of the education for preparing for any kind of a stressful situation is telling people that you can improve your cognitive function by spending a minute to take deep, long, slow breaths. Simple. You oxygenate the system, you change the chemistry, you improve your smarts. That's a specific skill that ought to be included in disaster response. If you're ever completely, this is true in real life, if you ever completely freak out, it's what they tell soldiers, I think, in general, correct me if I'm wrong, deep, long, slow breaths changes the chemistry in your system and helps you think more clearly and do everything else better. Here.
Thank you. I want to address the question about most vulnerable people and economically and socially. They're very good at listening. Maybe we cannot transfer technology the way we want to do it, but actually they do have technology. Most people have cell phones. Most vulnerable people economically and socially have a huge TV and a cell phone. So there's ways to communicate with them. But they're very good. They cannot worry about risk management on a daily basis because their priorities are others. They have some priorities that we don't want to think sometimes about it. We have to, because that will help them move to another stage in the risk management process. But sometimes we refuse to do it. But they're very good at listening when you go to them and tell them directly when something is going to happen that they're facing a huge risk. And they're willing to do whatever you ask them to do. That's for once. For citizen reporters and the burden to the emergency management, risk management process, is that they have, it's probably that they don't take conscious that of what they're doing. And that sometimes is a little bit irresponsible. And they don't measure that whatever they're doing could be creating panic, could be making people more afraid of the scenario they're facing. It could be very good, like sending pictures, that's good. Talking, we like talking a lot, and then sometimes we talk more than that we wish we had. So I'm going to pass the microphone at this moment.
Just a couple of observations about the citizen reporter. They're part of the new reality. It's a changing reality. It's changing rules. They're going to do it anyway. It's up to us to adapt. It's up to us to understand how the rules are changing, how we can tap them, how we can harness them, whether it's through skills-based training, but ultimately, how can we engage them in a productive way? Because they're going to be doing it anyway. And it's not enough to say, well, they're not formally trained journalists. They're there as a resource for us. And it's an imperfect resource. But it's a matter for us to figure out how to harness this new technology that we're calling a citizen reporter.
Okay. The question was about risk assessment. How do I see risk assessment presented these last 2 days can help communities or local government before or after a disaster? I would like to remind you that risk is a product of two things: an area and a probability of destruction of some infrastructures. First, in risk assessments, we do have some measures of flooding to pluviometers, pluviograph, and things like that, measures of seismic movement. But in Haiti, when we have a flooding, all the instruments are gone with the flooding because they are placed in the wrong places. I remember, for example, the GPS instrument to measure seismic movements, they were gone with the collapsing of some buildings. This is why it's so difficult to have risk assessment, because we do not have any memories of what was happening. The other important issue is for mapping or GIS maps, or they are all lacking in Haiti. And we have difficulties in managing urban planning, or we do not have enough ideas to make evaluations of the losses or the damages. We were very pleased to see in the last event in Haiti that the World Bank and all Google and Microsoft provide a lot of new technologies that could help in assessing the damages, and you use them in the PG&A, the post-disaster need assessment in Haiti. But this is a very big progress.
We're going to thank you. You guys stopped 1 minute before the hard stop of this. I'm going to move over to these panels over here just to make sure that everyone focuses over here. And this is the agenda that we wanted to start to build in this session. And this is the how to make ends meet, action items or recommendations in the pre-disaster phase. This panel is for making ends meet, action items or recommendations for the during disaster phase. And this is the same for the post-disaster phase. And we've asked our panelists to start to write their recommendations down. They're written in blue, so you guys are not hidden here. And for their closing comments, we're going to pass the mic back down through our four panelists. And this is an on-the-fly. This is a new reality, too, Tim. Since we're out of time, we have to be a little adaptive here. I'm going to ask the panelists to keep their closing comments about the recommendations that they want to put or have already put on these panels. And as they do that, I invite the audience to get sticky cards from Sheena or from John and also come up to help build this agenda. Is everyone clear? Does this make sense? Good? All right. Tim, you're up.
So what I focused on in terms of the story and the narrative was around skills and how skills are an incredibly important part of the enterprise. And the real power of the enterprise, it was in what? It's in repetition, it's in rehearsal, it's in refreshing, and it's in remembering. So as one last go around here, there's an active shooter in the building. What are the four things that we need to do? Number one, get out. Number two, call out. Number three, hide out. Number four, this is the enterprise in action. And it happened in the last hour and a half. And I would almost bet, I would almost guarantee that 2 weeks from now, you're going to be kind of daydreaming, and this is going to come back to you. It's going to filter back into your consciousness of that guy was saying something about if there was an active shooter in the building. And guess what? What's going to percolate to the surface are at least 2 to 3 of those. The get out, the call out, and the hide out, and the takeout. That's the power of the enterprise. So that's the message I would leave you with.
It's going to happen when we pass the McDonald's and we think about takeout.
When I was, as you notice, I prepare everything I was going to say. As a public official, you usually do that, so you don't want to say more than you should, or less. But I'm putting here what I think we have to work on. Building capacity, this one was first, and identify what motivates people. This one it belongs to every single phase. It's coordination and communication. And trust that I mentioned for the post-disaster phase, in the recovery and the reconstruction. But I want to leave you with really an anecdote, an experience I had. I don't know if you remember the flooding, the big flooding we had at the end of 2007 in the south of Mexico, Chiapas and Tabasco. When I was there, I usually at the end of the day, I went to the shelter, a big shelter that was housed of around 2,000 people. And usually talk to the people of the Navy were the administrators of the shelter, although there were people from the health department, private sector, NGOs, working all together. And I went, usually my team and I went there to release stress. Can you believe that? We were talking to the people in the shelter to release our stress. And one day we were walking around to see what people took with them, just to save from the flooding. And most of them took clothing, some clothes. Most of them took the TV, and then all the TVs were plugged in and on at the same time in the shelter. And there was a woman there that she took the washing machine. That was my reaction. I said, like, why? And I talked to her. I said, I wanted to know why the washing machine. And she talked to me. She looked at me like, don't you know? I wash. That's what I do for a living. I wash other people's clothes. So that's my mission. I want every single person to know what they're supposed to do in life and what they're supposed to protect when a disaster comes. I share this with you. You can make it your own and you can share it with people. I think it really opened your eye and what we public officials in the emergency management field wish to accomplish, that every single individual knows what defines him or her in society and how can they survive to tell about it, to talk about it. Thank you.
Okay. Here we have. Okay, we have two pictures of migration in Haiti. In order to do better in the future, for the people we seek to protect, we must embrace the fact that the strength is not in the numbers, but in the community and in partnership. This is one first lesson. Another important issue is alert system. We need to have a better system that could improve information for the population. Of course.
You use your hand.
Right.
Yes.
I used to be a TV reporter. Go ahead. Go ahead. No, I'll hold it. You use your hand.
Of course, resilience is built on prevention, protection, a better crisis management, but mainly on credible alert system. Here is one example of an application built in Haiti. Next one. And last one, well, here is some twittering. One of the main criticisms of Twitter is that it is a collection of pointless babble. But this mostly depends on how we look at information. On the left is a network of, you see on the left side is a network of Twitterers on the topic of Gary Coleman's recent passing. Do not ask me what cause is falling. I don't know. Do not ask me that. But on the other side, you can see a graph of a network of Haiti people discussing with my son on the earthquake. A key difference in the two graphs is that the second one has clusters, has communities, and it is evocative of ongoing conversation. We have to work with the important nodes in those social networks. And what we have to do is, next one. Okay, let's go quickly because we do not, okay, no, get back. Okay.
Round of applause for Sheena for the slide change.
Building community resilience in Haiti, technology innovation must serve ideals of sustainability, equity, and growth. But this is possible only with a democratic, proactive, decentralized, and inclusive state guarantor of the public interest.
Big challenges.
But before you are let off the hook, is there anything that you would like to add to these panels in a specific recommendation? Wait, you go.
Trust is very important between create disaster and also between and during the disaster. Coordination and control is very important, but working with networked people is most important because during the disaster, one of the nodes will fail. And the internet is marvelous because you have a lot of nodes linked together, but when one fails, we can use another route. During post-disaster is a problem. Post-disaster is mainly a problem of logistics, supply chain management, and communication, common, and information and control. That means the way we manage the post-disaster should be different of the way we are managing during the disaster. Thank you.
Hello. Oh, they got it. Who's on the sound system? Good job. Disaster risk management, pre, during, and post depends a lot on the choices that people make and their behaviors and their judgments, not the managers, the managees, the people. And needs to be incorporated more into what the managers plan for, do in recovery at all stages. And that can be done better if you realize that it's not just giving people the facts. The perception of risk, threats to our health and safety, do we get out of Times Square or not, has to do with how we emotionally evaluate the information. The tourists didn't get out of the square because they had the information and they thought it was cool. That's an evaluation. There are powerful literatures that can help you understand in advance how people perceive the kinds of disasters that you plan for, so that you can incorporate an understanding of their emotions just as you can incorporate an understanding of social media into planning for and responding to how people will make their choices and judgments during disasters. And let me tell you a quick story. I learned this at dinner last night. Because of a planned trip to Haiti of Bill Clinton to deal with risk management issues in Haiti, Fran was asked to devise a seismic risk plan, which he had been called the afternoon of the earthquake to come deliver short notice to the president and 10 because it was short notice, he left his house 10 minutes afterwards. It collapsed, and he had just left it to deliver the seismic preparation plan to the leadership of the country. So we're glad you're here.
I don't want to do this, but it's time to close this session. And I want to thank Tim Tinker and Ana Lucia Hill and Franz Varela and David Ropik for being here today. I want to thank all of you for being here today. We are technically in a break for the next few minutes, so if you have your ideas to go onto our agenda, please put them up. I think that we will stick around for a few minutes. If there's questions, we can answer. Tim has something to say, but I just want to say thank you very, very much. This was very fun, and I learned a lot.
We have a few copies of a new best practice guide. We didn't bring nearly enough copies, so it provides resources on many of the concepts and principles that we've been talking about throughout the morning. If you don't get a copy, just leave your card, and we'll be happy to email you or send you a copy. Thanks.